So in various spiritual teachings, you may often hear, you are only awareness, or something like, you are only the observer, you are only consciousness, these sorts of things. So I kind of want to clarify in a very simple way, in a maybe a very practical way, what this actually means. Because for the longest time, I really struggled to understand this. And you might too. And if you do still struggle to understand this, don't worry. Don't try to force yourself to understand anything. With all things in spirituality, they'll all make sense to you when they're supposed to. Whether it's a book you're trying to read, a concept you're trying to understand. Trust me when I tell you, everything unravels exactly as it should. Just be patient with the process and everything will make sense eventually. So basically the phrase, you are only awareness. Look at it like this. I'm sitting here right now, right? And I can pinpoint or I can point out my thoughts, right? I can think, or I can sit here and I can say, okay, right now I'm thinking about this tree. Right now I'm thinking about Joe. Right now I'm thinking about what happened yesterday, right? I could sit here and I could recognize each thought and I can label it and I can talk about what it's about. I can differentiate it between other thoughts. I could put a time frame on it. I can describe it, right? So clearly I can't be those thoughts, because if I were those thoughts, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint them or describe them. I would just be them. So thoughts are not something that are us. There's something external. There's something that come from some other place. And you have to start looking at them that way. Now also, you can do the same thing with your emotions. You could say, right now I'm feeling angry. Right now I'm feeling sad. Right now I'm feeling happy. You have this big range, this big variety of different emotions that we feel. And they come and go. And the same with thoughts. It all comes and goes. None of it's permanent. None of it's stable. It can literally, any of that can change in a second. Our thoughts are constantly changing. We could be so certain about one thing and then someone can tell us something that completely changes our mind about our thoughts. Same thing with emotions. We could be extremely sad and then someone gives us some great news and now we're happy all of a sudden, right? So I think we can agree that both of those things are constantly changing. So they're clearly not us. They're not who we actually are. We can't be an emotion, because I can sit here and I can almost observe the emotion. I can look at the emotion and say, oh, right now I'm feeling this emotion. The same thing goes for the physical body, right? I can look down and I can notice, well, I have a physical body. I have arms, I have legs, I have a chest, I have a head, I have, I can point out all of my different body parts. So I can't be the body if me, whoever I am, whatever I am, if I could sit here and I could look at my body and pinpoint it and describe it and talk about it, then obviously I can't really just be a body. So the thing is, if I could sit here and I could if I could point out my thoughts, if I can pinpoint my emotions, where they are, what they are, if I can look and observe my body, then who the hell is doing that? Who's doing all that? Think about it. Really, really just sit and contemplate that for a second. There's somebody here or something here that can sit and can notice all of the thoughts, can notice all of the emotions, can notice the body parts. What is that? Who is that? That's the fundamental question in spirituality. That is your true nature. That is just awareness. You're not a person, because to say that I am a person is literally just another thought. It's just another concept. You're the awareness that can sit here and just observe all of these different things. You can observe the emotions, observe the thoughts, observe the body, observe experiences, observe everything around you. You are literally just that observer, and that is it. That's it. That's the fundamental teaching in pretty much all mystical spirituality. That you are just that thing, whatever it is, we don't know. It's a mystery. It's just consciousness. Nobody knows what consciousness is. This has never been figured out by scientists. It's never really been figured out by anybody. You are just that consciousness. That's what consciousness is. It's just an experience. It's just whatever you're experiencing, without labeling it or without judging it, you are just that. And that's basically in most Vedic philosophy, Advaita Vedanta in Hinduism and Buddhism, they sometimes they call it, you are that, they say. You are just that which sees, as Ramana Maharshi says a lot. I don't know how else to put it, but that's the point. That's what you really have to kind of grasp. And it doesn't, and this is essentially what spiritual awakening is, and enlightenment is when you truly, fully, internally realize that you are nothing. If you were to just sit right now and just completely turn your mind off, like just don't think about anything wherever you are, and just observe, just look around without thinking, without labeling anything, without thinking of colors of things, without judging it in any way, but just sort of look around and just observe with a quiet mind, with a silent mind. Do you notice how you can do that? That's fundamentally what we are. We're just that consciousness, and it's just a collective of that, of everybody, every being in the world is just that. Animals don't realize that they're animals. As Matthew McConaughey famously said in my favorite show, True Detective, human consciousness is a tragic misstep in human evolution. The fact that we became so conscious that we think we're under this illusion that we are human and we have a mind that can think. The mind doesn't really exist. The mind is, what is a mind other than a bundle of thoughts, which we already established isn't real because they're constantly coming and going and they're constantly changing. So we're obviously not the mind. When you don't have any thoughts, there is no mind. We're too smart for our own good, you can say. And what happens is with our mind, we create all of these desires and all of these fears and all of these problems, all of these worries, all of these, the past and the future, all of these concepts of past and future. None of it exists. None of it's real. In a very, in a practical sense, yes, that stuff is there. There were things that happened. But only for that to really materialize into something, it has to filter through our mind first. We have to think about it first. I was just looking at some ducks in the pond, and I noticed how they don't realize that they're ducks. They aren't aware of that. They're not aware enough to realize what they are, that they're ducks. They don't sit around being jealous of other ducks. They don't worry about the past. They don't worry about what happened yesterday with their pack of ducks. They only live from their intuition and what they need to do right now in the moment. All animals are like this, but for some reason I just really observed it with ducks. I observe it with dogs too. I made a post yesterday about dogs. They do the same thing. They're just content. This is why animals are typically always very content. They're not in a bunch. They're fearful when they have to be, only in the moment, but as soon as that, it's not that they don't have things to, be afraid of, or they don't have things that they have to deal with, but they don't look at it as problems like humans do. That's the thing. It's when I say we don't have any problems, yes, we have things that we have to deal with in life, but only our mind creates them as a problem, when really they're just things that are happening. So when the ducks have to fend off an enemy, they don't look at it necessarily as a problem or, oh, this is bad or anything. They just do it. They just go about it and they just intuitively handle that situation. And then they're done, and then they move on to something else. They don't sit around thinking about what just happened when they had to fend off the enemy. They don't necessarily sit around worrying about the enemy that's going to come tomorrow, or some animal that's maybe trying to eat them or whatever. Things just happen. And they follow their intuition to deal with those things, right? All animals do this. You can learn a lot from nature. And what happens is when you start meditating and you really sort of dissolve the thinking mind, you start acting that same way. You start living more from your intuition. Things just sort of start happening. As Nisargadatta says, things start happening naturally and spontaneously without any interference on your part. Events just unfold. Experiences just unfold. You don't sit around, really thinking about them too much. It just kind of all happens. And everything feels natural. It just feels right. You know how to deal with situations without your ego getting involved. You don't live from a place of worry or fear. You just live. You just exist. Things happen. You deal with them. You do them. You go about your day. And you forget it. You move on. That's when you're living from a place of awareness and not the thinking mind. So that practice that we just did a few minutes ago, where I was like, pinpoint, notice your emotions, notice your thoughts, notice your body, notice everything around you, and realize that you're not any of that. In spirituality, that is called neti neti. It's called the neti neti method of realizing that you're only awareness. And I suggest you practice this often. I suggest you sit and notice the frequency of how much your thoughts change, how much your emotions change, how much you can't be the body. Because if, for the body one, that was like the hardest one for me to really grasp. Like, how can I not be my body? I mean, you can cut off pretty much all of your body parts and still be here and still be conscious. There's people that were born with almost no body, with maybe just like a head and a chest or something, that probably has existed, where they're still conscious. The other method, which I'm going to make a very long, sort of detailed video on how to do, is called self-inquiry. This is like the ultimate method. So basically, just to give you the quick version with self-inquiry, you essentially, you silence the mind and you find that awareness inside of you. You sort of turn all of your attention in, and you sort of just find that observer, find that awareness, find that person who can sit here and look around, or that thing that can sit here and look around, whatever it is, and just fixate all of your attention onto it and inquire into it. Like, what is that? Like, really question, like, what is that? What is that? Who is that? Another one that was recommended by Yoga Vasistha, or the book Yoga Vasistha. Vasistha was the sage that wrote the Yoga Vasistha, I believe, is just question, what is this world? What is this universe, this vast universe? And you'll notice, because there's no answer to these questions, that's the point. Especially when you're practicing self-inquiry, like eventually you get to the point where you realize there's not supposed to be an answer. And that's the point. You practice it for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and you realize that your mind just starts dissolving. Your thinking mind starts dissolving. And you're just in pure consciousness. You're just in pure awareness. And you'll have dips. Sometimes you'll go back to thinking a lot, depending on what's going on in your life. If you don't practice for a couple of days or something like that, it has to be consistent. But like I said, I'm going to do a more detailed video on that. But for right now, what you can do is throughout the day is to just sort of turn your mind off if you can. Just sort of, take a couple deep breaths and just focus on the breath, or fixate your awareness on something without thinking too much about it. And just realize that that's all that you really are. Anything else is just a concept. The only reason you think you're a quote-unquote person is because people have told you that your whole life, or you were around other people. So you believe that you're a person. But really, you're not. You're just simply consciousness. You're just simply the experience. You just are the experience. You just are reality. You're one with everything. Maybe I'm moving a little too far away from practicality, but I wanted to try to keep this for the keep it simple for maybe the people who aren't really that spiritual or new to this, but just start recognizing that. You're simply just the silence. That's a good way to put it too. You're just the silence. When you turn your mind off, the fact that you're capable of turning your mind off is proof that you can't really be thoughts. Because if they can disappear that easily, then how can you be them? You're simply just that silence that's inside of you, that emptiness. That is your true nature. That is the self, as the Hindus call it, or the no self, as the Buddhists call it. But it's essentially pointing to the same thing. Pure, infinite consciousness. And this is everything. This is God. This is spiritual awakening. This is it. That's the ultimate. There's nothing else. People latch on to ideas of religion and God is a higher being and all of this because it's scary to realize that there is nothing and there only is just that awareness. It could be very intimidating. So I think that's why people hold on to these ideas of sort of this religious dogma. You got to be willing to give everything up to accept this. And it's hard. Your ego's not going to want to accept it, but you have to. It's true freedom. It's true liberation. So I hope this was helpful and informative, and let me know. I would hope to generate some sort of discussion in the comments below. And if you have a better way of explaining it, please feel free to share that as well. So thank you as always.